Russians have intensified the shelling on Pokrovsk to support their infiltration attempts into the town, but this came at a huge risk. Ukrainian units began targeting exposed Russian equipment, stopping the artillery barrage on the town and creating a window of opportunity for the friendly forces on the ground, RFU news media outlet says. It is noted that Russians are now bombarding Pokrovsk and the neighboring Myrnohrad with unprecedented fury to crush the Ukrainian defense. The Russian command has unleashed the full power of its artillery, including thermobaric systems. For months, the Ukrainian stronghold of Pokrovsk stood firm through endless bombardments, but now the defenders face Russian assault teams, often no more than 2 or 3 men at a time, who crawl forward through tree lines and ruins, using their own drones to provide overwatch. Each group that survives digs in and begins ambushing Ukrainian soldiers and civilians alike, RFU News says. This is combined with heavy Russian drone activity and artillery fire, as Ukrainian units report that even reaching their positions has become a deadly ordeal, with every road into Pokrovsk being watched by Russian FPV and fiber optic drones. Yet despite the chaos, Ukrainian defenders hold, and their answer has come in the form of a fierce counterbattery campaign. As Russia pushed its artillery forward to pound the towns, Ukrainian drone reconnaissance seized the moment. When thermobaric launchers fire, they must do so within a short range of 3 to 6 kilometers for the TOS-1 and around 15 kilometers for the TOS-2, exposing themselves to detection. Ukrainian operators spotted one such system near the southern edge of Pokrovsk. Within minutes, a pair of FPV drones struck it, detonating its fuel and rockets in a massive explosion that killed the crew. Another strike, captured on video, showed a Ukrainian FPV drone diving into a BM-27 Uragan multiple rocket launcher, destroying it on the road, RFU News reports. Later, a BM-21 Grad launcher was caught firing and obliterated seconds later. Each destroyed system reduces Russia's firepower, giving Ukrainian forces a narrow but vital window to regroup. Ukrainian artillery units joined the hunt, destroying an ancient ML-20 howitzer, a relic from before the Second World War, that Russian troops had dragged out of storage to compensate for mounting gun losses. Precision airstrikes have followed, including 3 GBU-39 glide bombs dropped precisely on 3 Russian batteries firing from tree lines south of Pokrovsk. Despite Russian claims, the intensive bombardments, and the attrition, Pokrovsk still stands. Recall, Russian soldiers have advanced further into the city of Pokrovsk, threatening not only to take the city, but to complete a larger encirclement of the surrounding area, as independent analysts and commanders report a serious deterioration of the Ukrainian position in the area. The defense of the major city in Donetsk Oblast, which has held out for over a year of heavy fighting as one of the main hotspots of the front line, looks to have begun falling apart as Russian soldiers in their hundreds have broken into the city limits, spreading in all directions. According to the Ukrainian military, 11,000 Russian troops have been concentrated around Pokrovsk in an attempt to surround the city. Ukrainian commanders' reports as well as open-source data show that Putin's claim of a complete encirclement is still far from reality, but the situation is undoubtedly highly dynamic and deteriorating for the defending side.
Fines, arrests and prison sentences. They are being used in annexed Crimea for discussions about the Kerch Bridge, which became a military target during Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Russian security forces have launched a comprehensive system of anti-extremist persecution in Crimea, which human rights activists call repression and a means of intimidation of the population. Crimea.realities explains what's happening. While Crimea is annexed by Russia, the Crimean Bridge serves as the main logistical artery between them. The prospect of its destruction began to be actively discussed after Russia used it to transport military supplies and personnel to the Ukrainian front. The fate of the Kerch Bridge during the military conflict between Ukraine and Russia is being actively discussed by global media, politicians, military personnel, and activists. It's also being discussed in Crimea, but the topic is unwelcome for local Russian authorities there, as it could lead to criminal prosecution. Opinions that the Kerch Bridge should be destroyed have become so widespread on the peninsula that they have attracted the attention of Russian security forces. Crimea has been engulfed in a wave of persecution for statements about this bridge. As a rule, Russian security forces invoke Section 2 of Article 205.2 of the Russian Criminal Code, public calls to commit terrorist activity via the internet, for such public statements about the Kerch Bridge. This article carries a penalty of up to 5 years in prison. Russian security forces regularly detain Crimeans on such charges. Similar cases are recorded in various regions of the peninsula. In July, the Russian prosecutor's office in Crimea approved an indictment under this article against a 53-year-old resident of the Sovietsky district. He is accused of posting comments on social media calling for the destruction of the Kerch Bridge. Security forces are also pursuing a Sevastopol resident for calling for attacks on the Kerch Bridge in a Telegram message. The man created several accounts from which he justified drone attacks on Moscow and called for and publicly endorsed missile strikes on the peninsula, the security forces said in a statement. 2 residents of the Zankoy district were previously arrested on the same charges. Law enforcement officers visited one of them in July and the other in September. The latter allegedly administered a Telegram channel with materials justifying the bombing of the Kerch Bridge. Criminal cases have been opened against both. This is how the occupiers punish even for words. The Ukrainian Center for National Resistance emphasizes. In September, FSB officers detained a 22-year-old resident of Sevastopol on suspicion of inciting terrorist activity and justifying terrorism. On social media, he called for a missile strike on the Crimean Bridge, as well as for violent actions against Russian citizens. Using an account with a pseudonym didn't help. The FSB's Crimean headquarters stated. The Crimean Tatar Resource Center called the detention illegal and strongly condemned it. The defendants' position is unknown, as is whether they have the means to effectively defend themselves in court. Against this backdrop, Ukrainian developers have created the game Bridge Hunter, in which players can destroy the Kerch Bridge using various weapons. The game is available on Steam and has already attracted the attention of Russian propaganda outlets. This suggests that it could also serve as grounds for persecuting Crimeans. Accusations of extremism and terrorism are a common tactic used by the Russian government to pressure those it deems undesirable. According to the Ukrainian human rights organization Zmina Human Rights Center, the organization cited the September arrest of 48-year-old Nikolai Semiletov from the village of Izumrudnoy in the Zankoy district as an example of this practice. He was accused of calling on social media for the destruction of the Kerch Bridge and the murder of Russian citizens and political figures. Ukrainian human rights activists previously studied the judicial practice of persecution for pro-Ukrainian views in Crimea and concluded that the fight against Nazi and extremist propaganda is used in the occupied territories as a formal pretext and is applied for any manifestation of sympathy for Ukraine.